Thank you. We will start with Scott presented us already. My name is Franck Murat. I am BIM Director at BIMOne and Louis Tremblay. Good morning. You hear me? Yes. All right, I'm sorry about that. So we're going to do the presentation in French, but Ville de Quebec is very French. I come from Lac Saint-Jean, very French. Louis Tremblay from the City of Quebec since 2010. In 2016, I'm dedicated as a professional for BIM implementation at the city. I participated to the amphitheater project in Quebec, the multifunctional center to welcome the Nordic team. And since 2 years, I work with Franck on the BIM implementation. So today we're going to present the BIM implementation regarding business practices, digital business practices. So quickly we'll show other people that work with us as well. There's Pierre Varnier, Louis Martin Guenette. Louis will explain the different people that make up this entire program for transition. And regarding BIMOne team, there are many people that are working on this. 50% are Vincent, and I want to show them so you see all of them, because a lot of times you see only one person on stage, but there are multiple people working. To start, I will let Louis explain the context of the City of Quebec, in which frame we evolve. So the City of Quebec is has a population of 2 million people. The greater Quebec region. The beauty of the city is we have very nice projects. There is a park project about 70 million for construction budget, an operation budget of 70 million. So we have a lot of different sample or pilot projects. We have arenas, we have aquatic basins, so we have multiple projects. There have been a lot of mergers in the arena in terms of BIM, but regarding different business practices. So regarding BIM practices, it brings all this integration. How we started in BIM, we had the chance in 2013 to work on the amphitheater project. It's a project that was realized in traditional mode. And then we went to the construction phase. We gave the construction mandate to Pomerleau, which had multiple experts, technical experts. And we took some plans for construction, and we integrated all the plans with BIM for construction. There have been some issues, naturally, but we finished at 370 million. It's not all because of BIM, but we realized that the collaboration, the approach of having people around the table, the exchange, the owner, the contractors, professionals. We build before getting to the construction site. We actually get to the construction site, everything is there. There's no dismantling, there's no issues on the construction site, or much less issues. We've seen this before where the plumber doesn't get along with the electrician or with other contractors, but there are plenty of benefits with BIM that helped us with the logistics on the construction site. What helped us as well is a digital model. We have to have a 7D model, BIM model, to get to avoid what we see on the on the screen, all the paper, the USB keys. We'll bring it under digital form to use it for operations and maintenance. We delivered the project after that, and it was a challenge. We have to make a bridge between the projects and operations and maintenance. This is an organizational problem. Whether it's in the public sector or the private sector, people in construction cut the ribbon, they give the documents, and they go away. So this is a repetitive cycle. So maintenance, commissioning, and exploitation. We have to bring all this practice together. Another challenge is all the commissioning process. All the documentation that we want to generate coming from the commissioning process was a challenge. We want to digitize all the practices to cap information at the source. Franck mentioned before, the same information could be entered up to 7 times in the same project. 7 times. The sources of error are related to the costs. So what we want to do is capture at the source the information in order to use it for the project lifecycle. There is a clear conclusion. There's a lot of extras on the construction site. Why? Because there is an insufficient level of coordination between professionals. The context of the projects have very tight schedules. So a lot of times we get to the construction site and there are problems with coordination that show on the construction site, which costs a lot of money. So this is what BIM also brings to us. Essentially, if we can build 9 amphitheaters and the 10th is free, I don't know if we can say something like that, but regarding the process, there is a will to do this for all the buildings for the city. We want to go in BIM, but the reality is there are plenty of advantages, plenty of BIM uses, interesting things. But when we face the reality of the market, it's different. We will talk about it later during the presentation. We should not forget that we actually are delivering a construction projects. We are delivering a building. We're not doing BIM, we're doing a construction project. People tend to also forget that, yes, we want to do BIM projects and diminish costs, but they underestimate the effort behind it, all the human aspect, the change management, the impacts on the organization. So it's very important to think about all those things. Yes. So here, essentially, we see the wheel. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with the BIM wheel that represents the cycles of a building. Our challenge is to start with design all the way to the demolition of the building. The information is basically cycled through this entire wheel, and there's a lot of information loss. So we go from design to construction, we lose information. We go from construction to operation, and we lose some information. So the question is, how do we get around that? So after 1 year of going in pilot projects and with community centers, we want to start with work with BIM regarding community service centers, and we realized that we have to request BIM basically on these projects. We have to work with some competent consultants. There's BIMOne that helps us with all the coaching, the processes, everything that's technology related in BIM. And we gave another mandate, which is by Planica, which is asset management related to BIM. Define requirements, see in which manner the entire life cycle management could be optimized. During this process in the last year, Ambionair joined this process. They helped us take into operations all the information collection through operations and maintenance. So we're talking about standards, the naming of equipment and systems, in which information do we actually we transfer it to property management or operation software. We have our trio, and our first trio is right there on the screen: BIMOne, Ambionair, and Planica. And what's important is we have some good results up to date. So as you see, the City of Quebec went for call for tender, and we won this tender. And we came in this context, and we had to put in place all these processes, and that was a challenge. The first point regarding this is I will talk about the BIM1 approach. The idea is to coach the client, but we will not come with a prepackaged solution. We have standards, of course. We know them, all the fundamental elements of BIM, but the idea behind this is to take the specific needs of the city and to address them. Another point is it's not us that decides what is the destination that we're trying to get to. It's the city that decides that, and our role is to coach them to the best of our ability and to bring some solutions and ways for them to get to the objective. And we know that there will be challenges or issues on the way, and we will always readjust the direction to get to the objective. The point is to do some custom or bespoke work and not just do a copy-paste and it's going to work. So we get to a certain project and we get to the shopping list basically that corresponds to all the BIM uses that you can imagine. So as a client, I wanted them all, everything on the screen. So Frank told me, relax. So yes, ultimately we want to get there, but we have to start correctly. So this vision, these objectives that are very high, and we had 2 projects, 1 + 1 + 1. So we had 7 projects that are ongoing at the same time for us to coach the City of Quebec in terms of process. So if I may, we got the 7 projects because we had 2 pilot projects and 2 community centers. And management said we will go in a big change. We don't want to create tribes or groups. Some people that do traditional and people that do turnkey projects. So you have to break this concept. So we will do all our projects henceforth in BIM. So we said, Frank, let's go. But so we embarked on this, and we said it takes us some reflection time. We cannot just start these projects and everything will be great. We have to do a reflection exercise just to think about where we're going, because BIM is not BIM that does the work itself. It's people that actually work, and this involves processes and whatnot. So we've done a lot of coaching projects, and in this case what we did is we talk about 3 fields of BIM. There are different people such as Bilal Sukar that talk about this, and the first field is everything that has to do with governance, the people. So we see in an organigram of the management, an organizational chart of all the interrelations between the different stakeholders in the project and the organization. What is the relation between people on the project? And this service is included in a bigger chart, which is the City of Quebec. There are a lot of different departments, and it's important to understand who needs what information, who has the approval mandate. So there are a lot of people involved, specialized contractors, suppliers, users that are participating in this project. But we had to absolutely address all this. So we did some interviews with people, process interviews, etc. So for people that think that BIM is only for professionals, architects, and engineers, you're wrong. It's everybody, the entire chain, everyone. So that's it. So there's a lot of work that was done basically regarding this, and we base all our reflection on the processes. If you want to innovate, if you want to bring lasting change, you have to change the organization. We cannot just change the technology. First, there will be some challenges, and we know that there's a hype chart. There will be some high expectations, and at a certain point, it doesn't work. So for it to work properly, we have to have a proper organization. So all the processes were defined as you see on the screen. Everything that was done regarding the service is to see where are problems with the inputs and the outputs. When we talk about quins, when we talk about small wins, small information that could be targeted where we could improve the process. So in that case, people embark on the project with us much more easily, and we can have their support. And the last aspect with which we should touch on is the technological field, which is always present on such types of projects. So the City of Quebec is a public organization, so it could not just change any software or choose any software it wants as it likes. It has to go for tender to change, and we have to work in that context, in that framework. Whenever you see some very integrated solutions, we have a tendency to think everything will work, but nobody works in one integrated software. Everyone works with different software with different processes. So the question is, how do you bring everyone together and tie the knot between the different software? So Franck mentioned regarding technologies at the City of Quebec, without saying that there was a slowdown or a break in our processes. And the cloud and the culture, it wasn't towards the cloud. They were not open to this data use. So it took 1 year before having collaborative platforms. And as you know, when we work with BIM, it takes collaboration or collaborative platforms. So it's a small issue. It's a change of culture. As well with human resources, the description of jobs changes. All the BIM services are affected by this. So we cannot underestimate the effort to implement BIM in an organization. So to communicate this, we created this feeling of urgency for change. We needed to have a vision, absolutely. And after multiple meetings of reflection, we came to this concept that is very simple, which represents what we're trying to do on this project, and that is to deliver the right information to the right person at the right time. If we talk about the entire cycle of the project, we did take advantage of BIM, and this information will be shared. We put this in databases, and the person that comes and takes this information from the database can use it to build. So the vision behind it was as simple as that, and it reflects other domains as well. But once we established this vision, we had to also explain how it will work and clarify everything. So as we saw before, the BIM uses, there are more than 900 that are classified also with BIM uses on Mars. Sometimes when we work every day with BIM, we can use it much easier. But whenever it's not something that we do on a regular basis, we have to clarify these things. So we use some uses. So we use something called BIM uses tree of causality relationships. So what uses will allow to go to the next uses. So we created a critical path to be able to deploy and use our efforts using this critical path. When we take a look, the conclusion is, or the ultimate objective is to have models that we can use. And with that, the city of Quebec, being a client, being an owner, even if there's a service of updating the models, the starting point is the professionals for these BIM models, the architects, the engineers, etc. So we had to do an exercise of structuring all this information and all these BIM models. So once we clarified all these situations, we had all the list of tools basically to develop, to clarify what we need. We created this chart that breaks it down by theme, and it allows us basically to know how we can frame this information and in a way to deliver the project. So we have the red step. All the red arrows represent the pilot projects on the screen. So these are the projects where where people were a little worried because we're changing ways of working. And the purple arrows represent phases of coaching of pilot projects, of deployment. So we assure people that this is the way that we're going to proceed. This is the new model. And blue is everything that is projects that are assimilated. So we see also another program which is team by team. So every department will have a group of activities that is planified to go to transition into BIM and to have a BIM process. You did a great job, Frank. Thank you. So another part of the work, I'll let Louis speak to that. So yes, I realized that I needed a BIM psychologist. When you throw yourself in a major process as such, you're shaking the organization. You are bothering some people. You have right to have some to do some errors, but you have to be very structured in terms of data, and you should not skip steps. So when we actually launched the first year, there was a lot of possibilities to have everything, and I want the all the BIM uses. But when we come to deploy, it's something else, and it's a considerable work, and we have to go get some competent consultants to put in place all these practices. So at the end of the day, we're talking about BIM. It's the BIM organization. It's the digital transformation. BIM is the change vector, but all the organizations will go there, BIM or not BIM. So we have to organize ourselves to be more performing. So BIM brings us to ask these questions or to reflect on ourselves. So this is the context. This is a vast program, so we said we will not have today to talk about all this. So if you have any questions, do not hesitate. We'll be more than pleased to answer after. But we said we will focus on 3 different themes which were essential to us. You see them on the screen. The phase of organizing a market, the theme of defining information needs, and the theme of control and quality assurance. throughout all the steps of the project. To organize the markets, a quick historical plan regarding the BIM market in Quebec. You have to understand that BIM, and it's the case everywhere, BIM came a lot by the professionals. It stems from where can we start the project, how can you organize in a way ad hoc to realize, create models and collaborate. So finally, the owners and the clients had a certain low maturity in this. And they said we wanted a project in a certain way. Before we used to make 2D plans, and now we're having 3D models. But this notion of BIM was not too clear. So the first few projects that were done in Quebec, there was only one line which said we want the project in BIM. That was it. So for a hospital, a CUSUM project of more than $2 billion, it was pretty ambiguous regarding BIM requirements. So the objective is how do we work together, the engineers, the architects, to structure our work. It was also based on, this is not the right one, it's the Penn State, the first guide of the Penn State was not made for the operations people, but for realization. They realized that not all the operators were used to these BIM uses. So it created a group of documents that were generated that had a descriptive nature to describe how do we do things so everyone can embark on this. But this caused a problem because it's a diffusion of in the market that was bottom up, which was done by the professionals, which was harnessed by the owners and then applied as such. So now we're facing a problem. The market state, what happened in the case of the city of Quebec and the execution team. So we had a reflection regarding this because we had an important client, but we had this management of the client towards the professionals. So instead of asking a deliverable from the professionals, we communicated a lot ways of doing and management, and we handcuffed the professionals basically with their ways of working because of past projects. So BIM changes all the time as well. So when we follow the evolution, it's important to keep in mind the norms and the standards, but you have to keep in mind that within 6 months, all the technologies can change, and the actions that were very useful 2 years ago, today are not pertinent anymore, and vice versa. And people will penalize you on projects. So there's this whole notion. There's also something that we noticed that the lead BIM manager that was found on the client side had a different understanding of the market, because people expected the lead BIM manager would be responsible for the coordination in the collaboration spirit. The BIM manager is responsible for the collaboration in terms of BIM models. So we have a problem because the client had to coordinate all the models, which is not his role as a client. So we worked at redefine this to say the lead BIM manager will have one in design and one in construction. So the management of professionals remains in their court, and we have a new transition towards documentation, and we started coaching people at the city so that lead BIM managers would report to an expert to approve the good ways that are proposed by the professionals. And we are not in this descriptive mode where we force people to do things a certain way, but the work gets done an equivalent way. I just want to mention that there are 7 pilot projects. So all these things apply to these 7 projects. And we had some issues when we readjusted. We don't have a project yet that has done the entire wheel or an entire life cycle. And this is why we're always having these reflections. And this is why BIM1 is defining all these requirements on paper. So regarding documentation, we see historically that in Quebec we have this. So we have a distinction between the BIM management plan versus BIM execution plan. So BIM management is on the part of the client. It explains what they'd like to have. And the BIM execution plan explains how they're going to execute the project. So the BIM, so we saw that many BIM management plans included a lot of execution topics. So we reduced this and we took out the sections that apply to execution to the BIM execution plan. And we have some documents that were very long and reduced them to 20 pages. And the documents currently are much more prescriptive than descriptive. And the level of maturity is not all the same for all the stakeholders, and there are some that are just starting out in BIM. So we had to have some documents that are more application documents that will explain the philosophy behind it. And the documents are much more prescriptive and direct. They're also flexible. So what we see on the screen is the BIM execution plan. And the execution plan is a template where we propose ways of working. We have some partners and professionals that are just starting out. So certain things are not known to them, so we will guide them. But it will remain a recommendation. And it's a problem because more mature partners embark and they dictate the ways to proceed. So our role is to recommend the ways to proceed so that we can all collaborate on the project. So it brings a certain difficulty, as Louis was mentioning earlier. We have very important challenges because what you see on the screen, we have multiple timelines, and there's always changes in documents. So at what point can we change the requirements and the ways to proceed on projects? We could not say that these projects basically started and it's too late. We're trying to get as many wins as possible on current projects. And to manage with partners, we will bring these changes. It should not complicate your process, but it should facilitate. And this is a lot of work, so it's meetings and it's work, etc. And it was a challenge, and we actually managed it. So the outcome was positive. So we did this whole change in this case. So this is the whole reorganization of the market aspect. So I think here to define the information needs, we had envisioned before people to do a certain survey in the operation and maintenance teams regarding what kind of information is pertinent. We will go by unit format, by type of equipment. Do you need the voltage? Do you need intensity, the weight, the dimension, etc.? So we thought about all kinds of equipment, and after 1,500 parameters or attributes, we did this whole exercise and realized that what do we do with all this? So this is where BIM1 addressed this question that Franck will explain in a bit. So that's it. We came during an era where we talk a lot about big data, all these themes, and again, as my opinion, and a lot of people share this opinion, we always ask this question not to the possibility and necessity. So yes, we work in IT and we work with databases. We potentially can put everything in a database and exploit everything through databases. These are the principles. So we know that behind the databases, there are humans that are working. And there's a lot of control behind it. So we had to, our purpose is basically to improve the processes. So the problem is we are not able to find documentation. We are not able to conserve all the information because we have some paper documents. And yes, we have some big lockers everywhere with big papers. And also on the construction sites. So people work with these things, but the problem is they can't find the information easily. So at what point do we make the transition to bring everything in paper and everything that comes from different stakeholders and different parties? How do we find all this in a database, consolidated database? So I feel it's weird saying that because a lot of people would say in the field of BIM that we want to put everything in digital format, every single parameter. I want to know how many pumps that have what intensity. But the question is, what is the value of that? We find ourselves with plenty of information that is not usable. So a lot of times we find plenty of information with a database that is not organized, not structured, and it's hard to find information. It's hard to find this information. So to digitize everything is a lot of effort. So we ask this question of comprehensiveness versus frugality. So at what point do we want to digitize everything versus only the critical information that will be useful for us? So there was this exercise that was done, and it's not too obvious, it's not easy, and people will go against the current, but it's important to state with which we'll start and to choose our battles. So administratively, it's a lot of work to collect data, a lot of data re-entry, because a lot of technical data comes in PDF format, and if you enter it in the database, it's a person that is entering it manually in the database. So it's done by the client, but it's also by contractors. And because there's a human entering this information, there's always a risk of error. So there's information that is validated by the manufacturer, but you are putting another layer of error because someone is doing data entry in a structured database, but we have to do quality control. So there's extra work to be done. So versus frugality, we only take what we need. So we have only the information that we can control much easily. And also there is a cost associated to that because it's not done manually, because it's not done automatically, there's a cost associated to this. So it represents a certain challenge to work in this case. So when we are trying to find the essential information, we are diminishing these costs. And you understand also, another consideration is a lot of people are involved in this process versus one person. We know that it's not just one person involved in this, but it's just the principle of having less people working regarding the added value. So there's another aspect as well. I could keep going regarding these aspects, but imagine that you have multiple targets basically and you're dispersed as such versus having one specific objective that you're trying to target. It's easily could be interpreted by humans, and it's easier to achieve and simpler to attain, and it's more pertinent to work in this way. So we did this exercise to say what are the essential information, and as Louis was saying earlier, we went from 1,500 attributes or parameters people will tell you in operation and maintenance will always tell you, I need this and this and this. But are you doing business intelligence on this? Are you using it in a database? If you're getting all this information and you select the actual element in the model, or you scan the actual element and you go in the technical specification sheet, do you actually get your objective? The majority of the answers is yes. So we could start in this way. It's a tiny improvement, but has huge added value. So it's not because we were not frugal at the beginning that we can't improve this. The start is much better. So the notion behind this is, and there's a conference right now regarding COBE, where we talk about standards. We talk about when we talk about operation maintenance, we talk about COBE. But COBE, so you could also check out what is happening with IFC4, which is which allows you to have the information stored in IFC4 versus COBE, and people don't have the are not used to using these standards, and it's important to choose the right format. So we took a look at these possibilities, and we have some parameters that identify the specific parameters of the city. So we speak French, as you know, and we had to look at parameters in French, the type in consideration to translate also from English to French as well. So the connection as well between Revit and Maximo, we had to redo our export standards. But when we talk about technical, when we work with COBE, we work with XML. We realized that there's a lot of information that we don't need, and we could structure the information that we defined. So as I mentioned, you could always talk about this after the presentation. The last point that we want to talk about is, okay, you want to talk about this? No, I'll let you present this section. So the last part we want to talk about is the control and quality assurance part. So obviously we are getting BIM models, and all those that are working with BIM models, what is the level of accuracy of the model? What am I doing with this with these models at the end? So it's not a question of we'll have a surprise box and we'll open it and find information in there. The big steps, as you know, there are the concept of data drops. We will define some regular intervals to drop information, but in a market that's in transition, we cannot unfortunately just require or set requirements and control at the end. We have to go through the entire transition. So the big steps that we have developed are to define a clear framework for work, so people know exactly what we want without being too pushy or too not to block people from working. So I saw some aspects in Revit where people say that people would specify that people do not model in a certain way in Revit. So the question is there a real value? Is there real value in this? Some of the models might be exported in IFC, which make this argument not too relevant. So this is why there is the open BIM format that is useful for this. So the question to ask is, do we need everything or specific things? And it's important to choose the specific attributes that you need. The second thing is we had some help regarding requirements of a number of every single equipment during the design phase, with which they can generate this number so that it's the same, and at the end of the project we can print on the equipment, which would be the same number that is used in the operation and maintenance models. How did we do this? to make sure that we have a unique number without having to go to operation and maintenance every single time to tell them we have an equipment and we have a number basically that need to generate for you to use in operation maintenance. We require some tools basically that will allow them to get to this. So control quality. So if you require certain things, you have to do the quality control as well. So we want to make sure that people actually start early in the process as well. This is one of the big advantages of BIM, the visualization that will allow the simplification of visualization. So we had some meetings much earlier in the project with people that were not integrated to the project before, but now they are. We also put in place some controls where we have some design models that are coordinated, and then there's the construction reality that arrives. How similar are the construction models to the design models? So the construction models will have some differences with due to construction constraints. So we want to make sure that the models that we received by we were talking about the digital twin a bit earlier before. So we want to make sure that the design and construction models are similar to the actual construction, so we can all benefit from BIM and with these models to use them in operation. So all these actions, all these milestones and all these tools that will lead, all have the same direction, and the purpose is to have a BIM model that we can use for commissioning, that we can actually give the right information to the right person at the right moment. So these are all big themes today that we're mentioning, that we presented in this project, and this is everything we wanted to present today. So I will pass the buck to Louis. So everyone wants to ask this question: what is the return? How much did you save? Do you have a feedback? Do you have issues? So it's hard to measure. We cannot measure this, unfortunately, in quantitative terms, but in qualitative terms, we see the execution of work, the way to work on projects, the way to collaborate together, design review meetings. Historically, the operation maintenance teams used to tell the clients or City of Quebec, give us the models and we'll take care of it. Now it brings them early in the process to collaborate. And we have some universal accessibility committee. There are some visual and physical handicap. We put all these people around the table and we show them the actual BIM models. And did you think about this color finish? Do you think about these considerations for people with visual or physical impairment? There's also an impact on the market. Regarding the maturity of the market is very variable. This is something that we know. We are in an industry that is constantly evolving. People want to go towards digital solutions, but the academic sector does not necessarily respond to the industry needs. So example, general contractors or specialized contractors. So there's this challenge. And the BIM success comes from a client that is that believes in BIM. We cannot just say we want BIM and to have a result. It takes a company. You should have boots on the ground. That's exact. So what is our recipe? We actually require it and we follow it. It comes from the clients, and the rest of the process the chain will follow. So all the sphere of activities at the city, we're getting there. So if we take a look at the international markets, if we take a look at the international markets as well, we have to get organized to get there. So I want to add another point. We see on projects, as we said, this is a market that is not huge as well. The maturity that goes up on every project. Sometimes we start on projects that have people that have worked on projects in the past. Everything is easier and people are very confident, and we see a real increase in competency in Quebec, and this is very interesting as well. The last point that I'll add is in the notion of implementation. The most important thing is we know that the travel is long, or the path is long, and there are a lot of problems along the way. One of the important things that we showed at the beginning is regarding the vision, regarding the processes, to understand everything, to do this introspection exercise, who we are. This is the key, basically, to make sure that every single step that we do during the project will not lead us to a dead end, and we could always improve, and we could always work on progressing during the project. So all this work should not be avoided. A lot of times we say we want to start with technologies, and this is one of the success factors, key success factors in that case. So this is it for the presentation. We will keep working on this. It's an evolving process, and I just want to know if you have any questions regarding what we just presented. Any questions?
Je m'excuse, il faut que je le demande en anglais aussi.
Aucun problème.
I just embarrassed myself trying to talk technical in French. Could you talk a little bit more about your relationship with Planica and how you determined that the asset management use cases were such that the product that BIMOne prepared was used and continued to remain relevant throughout the operations and maintenance? Specifically, what I'm talking about is at what point was the asset management interface developed, or is it yet, and how closely you guys work together on that?
For the relation regarding Planica, before BIMOne started, I was working with them for 1.5 years on all the culture of the asset management, because it's also a question of culture. Organizations are used to working in silos, so it's all the life cycle. So when we talk about the amphitheater project, we tried to bring this culture with documentation. So all this work was envisioned. BIMOne came in the portrait to make these thoughts and this vision operational that started, and to optimize it, and to get, as we mentioned earlier, to go and get the right information and to measure the efforts after that we could that represent putting this information up to date. So there is this relation with Planica directly with the city, and BIMOne had the more operational role. I can add also, currently at the city, the service that is more operation and maintenance is not yet fully integrated into the project. They see this coming, but we came and we said that the base of our mandate was design and construction. So we know that at the end there's a link, because we've done design and construction, but 80% of the costs remain in exploitation or operation. So it's good to do the first two steps, but we want to create these bridges with the third phase. So we went and got information and requirements and operations without it being necessarily part of our mandate, in order to define the framework that we define will be useful at the end. So they are also in transition. They're going towards maximum mobile and BIM in operation maintenance. So everything that was prepared before already answer their needs, and they don't have to embark in BIM technologies and not have to do all this work and change everything that happened in design or construction. So we worked in a proactive way to make sure that they participate in this process, and we work together. You also have to say that in our organization, people have to be ready for change. They have to be open. So there's certain culture to transfer and to communicate. So people, a lot of times you plant the seed, and then you water them, and you come back. So you have to bring the sensibility into organization, because there's a lot of stakeholders, different people. So when we talk about change management, the human aspect, this is what I realize. It's the whole human aspect of the BIM implementation, which is not to be ignored, and we have to absolutely focus on, and the adaptation of the organization as well.
You talked about quality control and consistency from stage to stage. Coming from the design side, we often cannot use the model from phase to phase. And also, it's really hard to control consistency and quality of each element and information that goes in that gets fixed up way too late in the process. Who does that, and how is it controlled, and how is it transferred from one project to next?
Okay.
So first, the information or the fields that we'll ask will be entered progressively in the model. So we don't request for the architects or the engineers to enter all the information right off the bat. So progressively, we will add some parameters, and we identified which parameters we will require by professionals, those that will be required from specialized contractors, and at the end the client will fill out automatically. Everything that has to do with technical sheets and links. We have a structure right now. There's a manual for a digital manual at the end of the project, and we have in it some URLs that are standardized for every project. So all the information of the URLs to connect objects together is the city that will do all this, because this is all automatic. We'll take a project, we have a model with all the elements that have uniformat code. We requested from the professionals to go in every single equipment, and they have 4 letters to enter. So once they do this, there's an automatic script that will give the description, the uniformat code, that will add the number of the building to give a unique number, and it will actually give a number to every single space. So the fact that we ask the professionals to ask a specific code, they can focus on what they do, which is to design the building, and at the end, so that it works. So we structured it in a certain way that is possible, and we brought some tools to simplify the task that they have to do, so they don't have to do a lot of work at the beginning and attribute a certain responsibility that is too much to handle. And at the end, at the moment where not at the moment that we transfer the model, there's from design to construction, there's a link between the parameters that is made, and we'll make sure that we control all the to make sure that all the equipment are labeled and numbered. And once we have all that, we will make the connection, and the connection with the technical specs and the folders, and this is in the name, and this is in the hands of the general contractor, to make sure that all the specialized contractors have delivered the information in a structured manner. So I'm giving a summary, but once we have all this, we have the models in IFC format that are connected with the operation and maintenance models that will allow us to see the information.
So that's the services that you provide, and as a design team, we just focus on Unicode and the building number.
Yes, there are some parameters, extra parameters, but we make sure that we actually simplify the task of every single stakeholder to get to the, otherwise we will ask everyone to put all the information in it, and it will interfere with their main work. So we focus on the commissioning to capture all the information, and all the information is used at the commissioning step. Well, thank you very much for listening in. Thank you, Scott and Jerry, for the preparation, and thank you for Tarek. Please. Thank you. So that was the first also for his, so thank you, Tarek. And as I was telling you,